if I could choose another career, maybe someday I'd be a professional beatboxer.
That's pretty far down the list for me, I would say.
It's pretty. Come on, get it up there. I mean, it's something you don't need anything. I guess it's like better than microphone. No, that's not a good one.
Not this one. This is the top one.
Is it?
It's not a good one.
Oh, that might be. How many views does it have? 30 mil?
38 mil.
Oh, yeah, that's probably a good one. Yeah, fast forward a little bit. Wait. A dude is making that sound with his mouth.
I guarantee you my 5-year-old I think could make better noise. I don't know. I feel like I hear AJ do this sometimes.
Like he's kind of like spinning like like that's pretty incredible though.
That's pretty good. It is pretty. This is pretty interesting, actually. It's moving up my list now.
You know how in church they have special music times?
Yeah,
I think we got to include some of this special music.
dude, like the
Beatboxing.
like the
Jesus beats.
Uh,
I don't know. It's just fascinating.
have you seen that? He's like a metal. He's like a metal drummer, and he's like all of his reels are like when the pastor. So, yeah, this guy.
Oh, when the church accidentally has a metal drummer? This is like double bass pedal. If Stevie's listening, he'll watch. We gotta do this sometime. Here comes just double bass pedal. Here it comes. Oh, more double bass. Come on. I mean, this is sick.
Yeah. Anyways,
I mean, that's a fire song, though, right there.
that's really good. Yeah. Also, you didn't. I didn't know this. Maybe this is my bad, but you had a birthday last Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm 34 now.
Dang.
Mid-30s, I think.
Mid-30s. No, I tell. Okay, so Brooke does this.
34 to 36 is mid-30s. 37 beyond is late 30s.
Brooke-
Maybe 37 is mid-30s, too. I don't know.
Brooke's a couple years younger than you. She's like, I'm in my mid-30s. I'm like, you're
No.
not. You're not in your
Early
30s.
30s until 34.
Yeah.
Early 30s until 34. 30 to 33 is early 30s. 34 to 36, I would say, is mid. 37 and
That's mid.
it's mid, dude.
It's
What
mid.
does that mean, by the way? Is that a good thing? Is mid a good
I
thing?
feel like it's like neutral.
Look
I
it
don't
up on
know.
Urban Dictionary or something like that.
Oh dear.
Just never go to urbandictionary.com, but look it up. If you need to know what some type of word means,
If you have kids,
what's it? Please don't say what that is.
Oh, I'm not gonna say what it is.
Yeah, read the definition first.
oh okay.
What is it? Top word.
Oh okay.
He's proofreading it to make sure.
Snub grub. It's when you're really hungry but you refuse to eat anything that you have.
Oh, because you're snubbing the grub.
Yeah. I feel
Dude,
like
I am
that's a pretty
so
good one.
snub
That's a
grub
pretty
right
good one.
now.
Sometimes you open up. Yep, not this one. We're not going to read that one. Okay. Mid.
Mid. Yeah, just MID.
Used to insult or degrade an opposing opinion.
Oh, so
labeling
mid
it
is
as
bad.
average or poor quality.
Oh, like that's mid. Like that's trash.
Like the economy right now, it's
mid.
mid.
I don't know. The government says it's doing great. I don't know who judges like how people can judge if the economy's going well or not.
It's just so I feel like we all as people are just like we don't believe you, right? Like you can keep saying that. It's fine. Do whatever you want, but we don't believe you.
Well, jobs are good. That's a positive. So anyway, so mid.
Yeah.
Mid is bad. I think because it's only 3 letters, I got that confused with lit, and I think lit's good. But lit's also like not a thing anymore. That's like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
What does lit mean?
When something is turned up or popping. I feel like you can't use the definition, or you can't use the word to describe the word.
Yo,
you know?
this is lit. And so it's like, oh man, that's mid. Like it's average.
Yeah, a bunch of the teens that I work with.
So if we live in the Mid Valley,
ooh,
we are average.
we're average.
Salem is Mid Valley.
Dude, a bunch of the
Mid Willamette
teens
Valley.
I work with, I have legitimately had to open up Urban Dictionary to get through a text message.
What did you
I'm
say?
just like, what are you talking? Do you like what I sent you? Do you not like what I sent you? It's sometimes it's a little challenging.
I'm all about the new slang. Like it's their own language kind of a deal.
It's super fun.
I don't know what millennials. I mean, what was the new slang for millennials?
It did take me the longest time,
Dude,
to know what SMH was.
shake my hand.
Yeah, I thought people were saying shmr, shmr, which is kind of the same thing.
SMH.
I was just like, there's a shmr. That's like the sound you make when you're like shaking your hand, like shmr.
Yeah.
But it's shaking my head.
When I was I was teaching at like a 5th grade camp in the summertime, and back then the cool thing to say was like when you say "What's up, dude," you say "Saw, dude."
Saw, dude.
Except then it like just became so short. It was just "Saw, dude."
Saw, dude.
Like, yo, dude. Saw, dude. Like, what's up? Remember the Budweiser commercial from the Super Bowl? What's up?
Like,
That was like what, early 2000s? Mid 2000s?
Yeah.
Mid 2000s, dude.
dude, that stuck around for a long time.
Mid 2000s. Mid.
Dude, those years were mid.
So mid.
2008 was, that economy was pretty
That
mid
was
too.
mid, dude. No, but what's below mid?
I don't know.
Mid is an insult, so it's something else that's even worse.
Could be sus.
Dude, sus is old though. Like no one uses that
No one
anymore.
uses that anymore? Oh man, I'm so out.
Drip, I think is cool.
Drip is cool.
We like, dude, that's drip. You should look it up and make sure I'm not saying anything that's inappropriate.
I did.
I think that's like cool though.
Very swag and cool.
Yeah, dude, that's drip, bro.
We one of them was saying this is one of the first messages that we were talking about, like getting ready for a shoot, and some kid was like, I'm gonna have to cop a fit. And I was like,
what does that mean?
I was like, what? And I can't remember. So a fit is like an outfit.
Like put on a cool.
Yeah. So to cop is to get, receive, purchase, steal, or have. So it's to
Just like to get it
in
by any
any
means
way
necessary.
acquire.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's like, oh, I'm gonna have to go get an outfit. Like I'm gonna have to go change.
Yeah.
But he's like, I'm gonna have to cop a fit.
Isn't it fascinating how language changes over time though?
Yeah.
Which is actually tying this back into the Bible. I took a college class about I want to say it's Old Testament survey, and he was saying how like sometimes we compare words in like scripture to each other, which I think there's benefits from.
Yeah.
But he said like if you think about it, the Old Testament was written over like 1,000 years or whatever, something like that. Language changes a lot over that period of time. Mm-hmm. So like you think about the old King James Bible, Old English. It's like you read that and you're like, well, what in the world are we talking about? This makes no sense. So it's just fascinating how language can kind of shift and change over time. And I think the internet kind of rapidly sped that up.
Yeah, dude. I mean, dude, just think if you read a Bible that was written like when I was in high school to now. Like it would be like King James to modern English.
I mean, that's just NIV, right?
Oh, man.
Well, there's different versions of the NIV. I think it was like 1995. NIV was most popular for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if we talked about this before, but I was reading some article, or it's just kind of pointing out the fact how it's fascinating. The first way that humankind communicated was through like pictures, as in like on cave walls and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And now we use emojis and GIFs and stuff like that. So it's kind of like come full circle.
I texted my landlord the other day.
An emoji?
No. I'm like...
flame money bag or whatever.
You get my rent?
Yeah.
No, I texted him and I was like, hey, there's a bush in front of, like right next to our door that kind of, I don't like how it smells. He doesn't like it either. And I was like, hey, are you cool if I pull that bush out? Mm-hmm. And he just sent me a GIF of someone going, stinky. It was like from my landlord. And I was like,
that's what I'm saying. That's how we communicate now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's so funny. Oh,
that is funny.
We have great landlords.
So we were talking about this pre-pod, how language shifts and changes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the core identity is the same, the way you communicate. But we were talking about property in the United States, where it's part of the American dream that you want to own. I mean, that's the American dream is like you own your own house, basically. Yeah. And we're saying how in other places of the world, that's like unheard of.
Yeah.
That you have your own land that's
of
your
land.
own.
Yeah.
That you take care of, And
like trespassing in the United States is like a real thing.
Yeah, right now, like if you have private property, you can, I believe, you can trespass anybody you want.
Yeah.
And you just say, hey, you're not allowed on this property, you're trespass, boom. And then you just have like a cop come and say like, hey, you're trespass. Anytime they come to your property, there's jail.
Yeah.
Which is, that's pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Now there's different like limits, like if you own private land, but if it's a business that's open to the public, then obviously you're not just allowed to ban anybody you want without a reason. But.
And there's states in our country that allow you to use lethal force to defend your property.
Yeah.
There's states in our country that allow you to use lethal force to defend the property of somebody else. Wow. Which is crazy.
Like in the South, like Missouri.
Oh, definitely the South.
Places like that, yeah.
Definitely the South.
It's just fascinating where, so we've been talking about the economy and stuff like that, pre-pod and stuff too, and in this podcast as well. And I try to view things from a 10,000 foot view. And so right now, we have different sources of information, as in like the mainstream media for the most part and the federal government for the most part is saying things are going really well. The economy's going really well.
Everyone just laughed.
Yeah. And some people are making a lot of good money, and for some people that's true.
Yeah.
But for other people, the pushback on that's like, well, inflation is still terrible. Interest rates have gone up faster than I think in ever before. The possibility of owning a home for a first-time home buyer is more challenging than, from my memory, than ever before.
Yeah. I was just talking about that with a friend of mine who's in the mortgage business, and he's like, dude, when we got out of college, he's like, you could get a house in Salem, like a nice house, like a 3-bed, 2-bath,
175.
Yeah, 175 to for in a really good neighborhood, like 250.
Yeah,
and like you could get a job right out of college that could afford you that, even with student debt and other factors.
Yeah,
like now, absolutely not. Like no way.
Well, it's interesting because it says I heard someone define it as inflation isn't really the price of things going up. It seems like that from the surface, but it's more of the value of the dollar is less. Does that make sense? And so you have to use more dollars to get the same thing, but it's not like the value has changed substantially. Yeah. It's more of, that's why they say if you just have if you 30 years ago put $5,000 in a savings account with no interest, not in the market or anything, just sat there, it's losing money. $5,000 30 years ago compared to today, vastly different amount of money.
Still $5,000.
Which is, I think we talked about this on the pod before. It's kind of a problem I have with the game show industry, because people like, who wants to be a millionaire and all this stuff, you win $1 million. I think Survivor now, you win $1 million. But the show's been going for 20 years, and the prize money hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And so $1 million in 2003, I think that was the first season of Survivor, dude, you're set.
Yeah.
2024, you win Survivor $1 million, you're doing pretty well.
Like you can take a year off of work.
Yeah, but you got to still have a job.
Yeah.
If we talked about this. If you're in San Francisco, you get maybe a bad house.
In San Francisco, that's just kind of like maybe your Christmas bonus.
Yeah, like a Christmas bonus. I mean, you could probably, it would help a big down payment, I think most homes in San Francisco are going for around $1 million, like starting home,
Yeah, it's so wild. Yeah.
But anyways, I think one of the reasons, like today, the market, I'm talking about the housing market, and I'm talking about this because my family and I are thinking about, we're in the housing market, and it's just atrocious out there. So all this is kind of the front of my mind. though interest rates have more than doubled within the last couple of years. Like in 2021, I think it was like 2.25% was the lowest it ever got.
Yeah, dude.
Which is
Which is
insane.
so wild.
Which is insane.
When we moved back from Memphis, we were looking at buying a house.
You're kicking yourself now.
And I was like, heck yeah, man. The mistake I made was they asked me about my job. And I was like, yeah, but it ends in August. And they're like, oh, we can't give you a loan.
You're like,
dang gosh darn it, man.
Yeah, because I mean, I've got friends that bought their homes for $225,000 and they have 2.25% interest. And so their mortgage payment's like $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
The only problem is they can't move.
Yeah,
you're stuck.
Yeah, you can't move. So I mean, that's cheaper to live, but you're just stuck. So it's like if you're forced to sell your house, you're going to be stuck with a 7% interest rate, and so all that money basically vanishes.
Yeah.
All your equity in your house vanishes instantly.
Yeah,
but
it's kind of a bummer.
But I'm kind of viewing it from an anxiety lens, where I think the market is continually going up. One, millennials all want to purchase a home, and it's the largest generation of people. And there's less homes on the market. As you said, nobody wants to sell their home. So it's just so fascinating. So everyone's really anxious. And I think the idea of like, oh, like it's always been our dream to own a home. So we're going to even be house poor to own a home, whatever it may be. And then everyone's anxiety is just way up here.
Yeah.
Instead of, as we've talked about, trying to go slow and to really process through and maybe waiting. I do think it's hilarious. You ask a real estate person, they're going to say right now is the best time to buy a home at all times. Like, you know what I mean? No one's going to be like, it's not a good time to buy. And part of it's right. Like, if you think you're going to be in a place for a long time, I think the best idea is just to get in somewhere and do whatever you can to find a home that's suitable, and then, you know, eventually refinance or, whatever.
Yeah.
So the reason I was thinking about that is because the Bible, what it teaches about like building your kingdom, your kingdom is not of this world, where it's okay to want to own a home. Like I want to, but at the same time, that's like God's not going to love you more. You know what I mean? Or God doesn't love you less if the doors don't open. But at the same time, I think He cares about your desires and your needs and what He's placed on your heart and stuff like that. But it's hard when it's just a challenging situation. I think a lot of people are in, but I do think there's great hope in that, where people can kind of see like, oh, maybe the American dream is not all it's stacked up to be. Like maybe I can live a fulfilled life without checking off all of these boxes that I felt like I needed to check off to be happy or to be a complete person, to be fulfilled. So I think a lot of people are really anxious I was listening to Mark Sayers with the Rebuilders podcast, and he was saying, I think we talked about this before, but we're kind of entering into a season of anger where for the millennials, and are you 30 yet, Bryce?
No.
Are you almost 30?
I mean, what's
are you late 20s?
I'm 28.
That's almost 30.
All right.
You're late 20s.
I know. This year I officially entered into late 20s.
Nice job. Late 20s. So, for the most part, millennials growing up have had the belief that we are going to inherit something better than what we were raised with. Like things are, as we've talked about, up and to the right.
Yeah,
the stock market's going to keep getting better. The income's going to keep going up. And because that's also all the campaign promises, right? We can be different all the way back. I mean, most politicians, I would say, for the most part, do that. Like, I'll make all your wildest dreams come true. They take it straight out of Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite's playbook, right? And now I think millennials are coming to the realization that is not accurate. Like we're in it right now, and it's not better than what it was. And so now they feel like that generation as a whole feels like that they've been lied to, and so now that they're angry, like this is like we thought it was going to be better than it is, and it's not. So, but I think part of that is now we get to. I think there's great hope for the gospel in that.
Yeah.
Because people are like, oh, like this is what I thought was going to be great, and it's not. And then I think for the Christian communities, we can say like, hey, this isn't all that life is about. I think the Lord made us like working is a positive thing. We want to work. We want to work hard. We want to give back to our communities. But that's not what our identity is in. And so I think we have a great opportunity to teach on the identity being in Christ. It's not what you do or what you've accomplished or what you own or what you have. It's who you are in your character before Christ, in your relationship with Christ. That's what can fulfill us.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's funny my buddy that I was doing a photo shoot with this morning. I guess real quick, I looked up the population distribution for the United States by generation.
Yeah.
Between the baby boomers and the silent generation, so basically anyone born from 1928 to 1964, they make up about 26% of the total population. So a quarter, a little over a quarter. Gen X is under 20%, 19.6.
Smaller generation, yeah.
Millennials are 21.67. And this is why everyone's afraid of population collapse, I think. Because you have, which, I mean, you can't be too afraid, right? Because we went from 20.58% with the boomers. Well, I guess, I mean, this is just what's left, right? Yeah. So, I don't know. But boomers currently are like 20.5%. Gen X is 19.6. You dropped a percent down, but you jumped up with the millennials to 21.67, and then Gen Z, so from 1997 to 2012, is 20.88%.
Yeah, I would guess that that's going to continue to go down. Like the coming generations will be less than, unless there's some type of cultural shift in our community, in our country.
Yeah,
or if immigration bails us out.
Yeah, but I mean. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we could go down a deep rabbit hole with that.
Sure.
I feel like overall, I want to hop back to cultural. I guess this kind of goes along the same lines of culture and our faith.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to say just Christianity, but faith as a whole. I mean, I feel like one of the things that we have especially like devalued, I think, as a culture is life.
Mm.
And life, I would say just human life and family, I think we've
100%.
And so
I got 4 kids. People look at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you have 4 kids?
Yeah.
It was much more common 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Like that's a normal family size.
Yeah. And I think, it's crazy to think about. And I think, you have stuff like abortion and, I feel like the breakdown of, just like dual parent homes, like not even like, I mean, you just look at how many people grow up without both parents, and that number is, I want to look it up because I don't want to misquote anything.
I think that's completely accurate though.
Without two.
I mean, what else is interesting to think about, like kind of similar lines you're talking about, but also the economy. Back in the 80s and before, you could live off a single income, where today that is so much more challenging.
Yeah, dude. So almost 21% of kids in America live without a dad.
21%, so a quarter, basically, a fifth. I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So 71% of kids live with 2 parents in the home. So under 3/4, so 30%.
I mean, that's got a drastic impact.
Yeah,
obviously.
I mean, I really think we've really broken down what does it mean to be a family and raise in a family and understand. I mean, I feel like as much as people want to say there aren't, like there are. Do I dare say it? There are there are roles in a household,
Whoa, dude. What? I'm just kidding.
I mean, you just think about it at like a basic level. Like stuff's got to get done.
Yeah.
Like trash has to be taken out, food has to be made, lawns have to be mowed, dishes have to get washed, kids need to be hung out with and talked to and played with and taught how to be. There's like things that have to be done, and I think
have we talked about? I don't want to misquote it, but there's some article that says like children have different type of endorphins that are released in the brain, and each parental figure releases different types of endorphins.
Oh, interesting.
So for fatherly figures, for the most part, you know, like you throw your kid on the couch, you're wrestling, you're tackling, you're Nerf gun fights.
Dude, we had a Nerf gun fight this morning.
Yeah, you hit pillow fights in the face, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that releases a certain type of endorphin. But then the more of the mothering side, also like you need both to be healthy.
Yeah.
And so like dads, I think just no matter how hard you try, there's just something that's not there on a comforting level.
Yeah.
That I think God has, you know, I'm not saying you can't comfort your kids, but I think there's a difference.
Yeah. I definitely lack some sympathy most of the time.
I think that's pretty common. I mean, in dads, you know, because that's why it's like.
Not that you don't have sympathy, but in comparison to my wife, I definitely lack in sympathy.
Yeah. I mean, it's just men and women are different.
Yeah.
I think different.
How dare you say that?
Different giftings and stuff. So I think that's.
Yeah.
It's the same way in a church. You have to utilize all gifts for the church to be healthy.
Yeah.
And I think the same way because the church is called the family of God. And so I think the same is with, you know, personal families as well. It's like everyone has their own giftings, and you got to use those giftings for the glory of God.
Yeah.
In the family system for it to be healthy.
Yeah. And I
function well.
I don't mean that to say like
well-oiled machine.
Yeah. And I don't mean I feel like for a long time like there was this culture of like women are supposed to be in the kitchen, and like there was like
I will say there's a movement of that coming back. I don't know if you've seen this.
Dude, it is coming back.
Supposedly, because that was big in the 50s.
Yeah.
Which I think is, you know, unhealthy.
Yeah.
I think it should be more balanced. Like that, in my view, like back then it was, my understanding, I wasn't alive in the 50s, but it's like, you know, female stays home, does all the stuff. The male, like almost like you serve me, I bring in the money and stuff like.
I get home, I sit on my lazy boy.
Massage my feet, make dinner. Like, no, I think it's much more of a team effort. Obviously.
Well, even like in our family, like I do the majority of the cooking because I like to cook. So it just makes sense.
Yeah.
That I do the majority of the cooking, and some people like. Some people that kind of look at that cross-eyed of like, oh, that's weird. You're like, why is it weird? I like to cook.
It's definitely like a culture thing. Because in different cultures in the world, it's like, it's just in our culture. It's been like that. Where it's like typically the female would cook. Where it's like there's nothing. That's just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with anything else than that.
Yeah. Mark Sayers actually has a really good podcast that he did that he gave at Bridgetown on roles in marriage.
Oh, interesting.
Which is really good.
I'll listen to it. I like Mark Sayers a lot. He's a wicked genius.
I'll have to find it and send it to you.
So smart. But anyways, so back Generation Z, supposedly, and by that I mean I think I've seen some TikToks / Insta Reels and stuff like that. But there's a new movement that's growing of younger women. By that I mean like early 20s.
Yeah.
And they don't want to work. They want to stay home and be a mom, cook meals, and be with their kids.
Yeah.
Which is just so fascinating.
Yeah, part of me, because
I don't know if they're doing it just for attention, which is a possibility.
Yeah, because I've been seeing this on like YouTube and stuff, and so part of me wonders, because there's people that have been talking a lot about stuff recently of like you get the extremes on social media, you know, if you get the like, and then you actually look. Oh man, I don't know why this thing keeps being funky. You know, you get the extremes on social media, and then you actually like go in and look at the data, and you're like, oh, that's not reflective of the data, you know. And so part of me wonders, like, is this just what's cool and popular on social media, or is it actually like
that's definitely a possibility,
a turn back? I mean, I'm fine with either. I think it's because we've had such a long history of like. I don't necessarily think that it's. I mean, I guess I feel like there's a lot of prefacing I have to do with this, but you know, I feel like for a lot. So I grew up in here. I'll do this by example. I grew up in SoCal and in like a pretty, I don't know, affluent city, I guess. I didn't necessarily grow up affluent. We just happened to live in. I mean, had a great childhood.
Yeah.
But a lot of my friends lived, there's this road, it was Baseline Road. And if you had a house above Baseline, you were kind of like...
doing well for yourself.
You're doing well. We live below Baseline. Yeah. We were still, and Baseline was the name of the street. It wasn't like the Baseline.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of friends that lived above Baseline, and you like look at their, like a lot of them, you look at their families, and it's like both parents had jobs, so both parents were like gone, and they had like a nanny or someone that took care of them, or they went through a divorce at some point, and like those, like a lot of those kids, like they didn't do so well after that or during that. But then a bunch of my, more of my closer friends that grew up either below Baseline or whatever, that had both parents in the home, went to church, did all these things, like they're great, and I really think like we're meant to like live in a family and live in community and live together. And I think, as believers, we would look at that and be like, well, yeah, duh, that's how God designed it. To
Made
live
in his image.
Yeah.
God is Father, Son, Spirit.
Yeah. Like
the family is kind of his image.
And everything he's ever done for history or everything he's ever done, everything that we could ever read in scripture is around having a community that's set apart, but you just take a step back, like put the Bible aside for a second and just look at it from like an anthropological lens. Like having a family, just everything works better. Like kids are more successful in the future when they grow up with two parents in the home.
Yeah.
So it's,
So it's on the same lines, what's interesting is that's what the church can be, I will say.
Yeah.
When Jesus' family comes to him and says, "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" It's just those among me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the greatest hope for the church in America today. That there is a lot of people who don't have healthy family systems. And then the church can fill that gap of the mothers and fathers, spiritual mothers and fathers, brothers, aunts, uncles. And as someone who comes from a broken family myself, when I reflect back, like I had a lot of, everyone's human, right? But I had a lot of years where I abandoned anything spiritual for the most part. The thing that I believe kept me or brought me back to Christ was because when I grew up, my family system was not perfect by any means. Again, it was broken. My parents got divorced when I was a teenager. But what was set in me was a deep importance for church. And so growing up, like we never missed church, ever. Like my dad was less of a church guy, but my mom was like, "You're going to church, The only reason he wouldn't be at church is if we're puking. Like other than that, we're at church. We're midweek, we're VBS, we're 5-day clubs, everything." So again, there's some things I think were legalistic about that. But I think it's the value of church is important. So when I went through all my stuff in rebellion, when I came back, I'm like, this is important. And the church is what gave me hope. It filled that gap for me. It had people that invested into me, and it showed me what a healthy family system could be. Or it filled those gaps. I'm not saying that, again, churches are filled with people are broken. So I'm not saying there's any perfect churches or whatever it is. But what I am saying is that the church can fill that gap in its community.
Yeah.
Which is what gets me really excited.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of people younger than me who have absent fathers. Because at the same time, like we read the stats and we're like, okay, so 3/4 of kids come from family systems with moms and dads. 25% do not. But at the same time, how many of those kids come from mom and dad systems, but when there's an absent parent still?
Yeah.
It would probably be much higher.
Much higher.
Like, parents are married, but at the same time, my dad's gone 95% of the time.
Yeah.
He's never around. Or maybe the parents are separated. It's just, they didn't want to split everything they have, and so they're just living separately. That doesn't mean that it's a healthy family system.
Oh, totally.
And I don't know if you could even judge that, but my hope and my belief and what gets me excited is the church can fill those gaps.
Yeah.
The church is it's a family.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And we've talked about that a lot of that's one of my big frustrations is, the church not being the church. But at the same time, it leaves so much opportunity for the church to step up and be the church.
Yeah,
in a time where I think it really needs it, and I remember I was really encouraged to hear this story once. We knew a pastor. It's funny. They were in America on missionary visas.
Okay.
Which you just think of like as a Western Christian, you're like, wait a minute. I thought we were being missionaries.
The United States actually has the second most missionaries sent to it than any place in the world.
It's just so wild.
A lot of people from Brazil, I believe, come here.
Yeah.
I think it's number 2.
Yeah. So this family was, what's number 1? I'm curious.
I want to say, if I remember correctly, I did a sermon on this a while ago. I want to say it might be Brazil, maybe somewhere in. Let me see.
Here, I got you. I got you.
You can keep talking about it. It's. I think United States was number 2 though, which is just fascinating to me about.
But so there was some weird thing where they were trying to buy a house because they've been here for like 10 years, and they were trying to buy a house, couldn't buy a house because housing market's ridiculous. And so someone in the church who's very wealthy stepped up, bought the house in cash, and then financed it back to them.
Wow.
I was like, no. And I think you look at that and you're just like, man, like that's what the church is supposed to be. Like you saw a need in that's a massive example of like, oh, you just bought a house, Yeah. But there's smaller examples, of, we meet with some foster families every now and then, like once a month. Mm-hmm. And we're just, talking about sharing about how the community of foster families, meets the needs of each other. Because there's not actually a lot of foster families in Marion County, believe it or not. There's only like 62 foster families in
For
Marion
the whole county?
Yeah. I'll have to pull up those stats later.
I was meeting with a guy at church on Sunday who asked if I would be his reference because they want to start fostering.
Oh, nice. I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
which is awesome.
That's so cool. I'll have to pull those stats later. But I think in Marion County it's like 62, and that's like non-relative family. There's a lot of like relative foster families that like take, they're like, oh, my niece came into care, and they take their niece. Mm-hmm. But there, and so they, we were sharing about how like the family of foster families meet each other's needs, and someone was sharing about how like the mom of a kid that they've had, that they just kind of hard times, and so they ended up just like buying them groceries, and they were just kind of like blown away of like, well, can we like repay you? They're just like, no, we're just gonna buy you groceries. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
And so like being in those moments, like being the church and sharing generosity and like, I think as the words of Jesus says, like bringing the kingdom to earth.
Yeah.
I think that those are the moments where like the kingdom, gets brought to earth.
It's incredible to hear those stories. And I came across a video on YouTube, and it was kind of like a mini documentary about a church in India, one of the largest churches in the world. I don't know what the name is. I want to say they have 100,000 people. But what's wild?
Wait. This church in India has 100,000?
India has 100,000 people. It's maybe more than that, dude. It's wild. They have like cards to answer. Anyways, so every person who's involved in that church, if you're a member of that church, the church pays for all funeral expenses for anyone in your family who passes away. Like they'll pay for the burial, the whole shebang. 2, they send you a birthday cake for every single church member. A boxed birthday cake to every single person who is in their church database.
Wow.
Every single year. Do you know how much, if you have 100,000 members, you know how many birthday cakes that is?
Dude, is it a Catholic church? No.
Search on like YouTube or something like that.
300,000 member.
No, that's it.
This is on CBN.
So they have 300,000 people.
Holy moly. What?
Yeah. It's in India.
Wow.
300,000 people. They pay for funeral expenses for every single person involved in their church who is a member. And they do a birthday cake, and they do other things. And they have staff like, if somebody misses one of their church services, they have a staff that follows up with that person and asks like, hey, where were you last weekend? How can I pray for you?
30,000 people joining a night prayer service.
Yes.
That's like these numbers like don't make sense to you, man. Like there's not 30,000 people that like attend church in Salem.
Is that many? I don't know what
Maybe.
it is.
I don't know.
It's not that many. It's so you think about it. Salem is a population of 170,000 people.
Wow,
this church
dude.
has almost double the population of our entire city.
It's like imagine if
It's incredible.
It's like imagine if basically everyone in Marion County went to church
at one place. And then they interviewed the pastor, the lead pastor.
Wow.
And
converted from Hindu, I just saw.
Yeah, he was converted from Hindu. And then he says like, well, yeah, the church faces persecution. But you know what? The church is persecuted and it just leads to church growth. And so they just keep growing. So they want to keep planting more churches. It's just
wow,
dude,
it's almost like
crazy.
the Bible says that's how it's going to happen.
But just like radical generosity and the follow up, like it's
wow, dude.
It's crazy, man.
Wow.
So I mean, it's just also thinking about like the worldwide church, like in the United States, we're all, the church is in decline, all this stuff, and that's true, and it can be a bummer. But then other places in the world, it's like boom, China, church is exploding. People are coming to faith. India. I think one of the most population dense countries in the world. Over 1 billion people, I think, live in India.
Mm-hmm. I know they're the largest. They're the largest now.
It goes back and forth between China, but
wow,
it's just that's crazy to me.
Yeah. So,
but the church again, the church can be a family, you know?
Yeah, dude, it's crazy. Hey, if you want to be my shameless plug for being involved in foster care. So in all of Marion County, there's 150 foster homes.
Okay.
So 60 of those are child specific. Okay. So like, kid gets placed with you. There's like a limit to what is fit. So anyways, I won't get too deep into this. So 28 relative foster homes. That's like an immediate relative. And then 60 of them are child specific. So you're like, hey, this kid comes into care. I want to get certified to take this kid, but I don't want to be like a foster home for other miscellaneous kids. Mm-hmm. So in all of Marion County, there's only 62 just regular foster homes. 62.
Yeah. Which population of what? 300,000?
Yeah. What is
400,000? I think Marion County is close to 400,000. Maybe not. 300,000.
346,703.
Yeah.
We dipped a little bit.
Also talking about, we dipped a little bit?
Yeah, that's what it said. I mean,
talking about
349.
This is everyone's moving to Polk County. Across the bridge.
Is that true? I want to see.
Yeah, I bet you Polk County's growing faster.
Oh, dude, Polk County's, dude, 700. Where do they put them?
No. That can't be.
That's Florida.
Yeah, I was like, no way we have.
That wouldn't make any sense.
That's so many people. Yeah, 90,000.
90,000. Okay, yeah, they're. I mean, tiny dip. Tiny. Yeah. No, just kidding. There's no dip there. So
there's been conversation in Salem, which is the capital of Oregon, which is where we live. Mm-hmm. Gang violence is a thing.
It's very much a thing.
There was a shooting in Bush Park about a month ago.
Yeah.
Gang related, I believe, is what the news said. Yeah. My question is, why are people involved in gangs? That's their family.
Dude, we told it. Did I tell this story?
Right. That's what it is, right? Like that's their group.
Did I tell this? Yeah. Did I tell the story of this? I can't. It was a podcast. I can't remember what pastor it was. It wasn't Mark Sayers. It wasn't Bridgetown. It may have been a Bridgetown sermon, but it wasn't Bridgetown speaking. Oh, it was who's the guy from Van City Church?
I forget his name.
Yeah,
I know you're talking
Pastor
about.
Van City Church of Vancouver. They baptized. This kid shows up, and everyone's like, yeah, like loving on him, and he's there for a few months. And he gets baptized, and then he just kind of like ends up like kind of like leaving the church, and so the pastor like sees him one day and is like, hey, notice you stopped coming, and he was like, yeah, man, I got baptized, and then everyone just kind of like oh, you're in, and then like. No one was there.
I don't know if you told me this story, if it's on the pod before, but I remember this.
Yeah. And so he's like, so he went back to the gang because like it was just such a deep family there, And his like, dude, gangs are better at being a church family than the church this, like that's not how it's supposed to be. Anyways,
I think the church in America most definitely is very individualistic for the most part.
Yeah.
But this guy, from what I heard, I was actually listening to a podcast. This is Tyler Staten, who's a pastor of Bridgetown Church in Portland. Mm-hmm. They're a very large church. They have more people meeting in small groups during the week than they do on the Sunday service.
Yeah.
Which is pretty incredible. And that's kind of like a Saddleback model. I think they have the same thing.
Yeah. Which is kind of like...
And also like Larry Osborne's church, I think is the same thing.
Yeah.
So like if you do large church, that's definitely the way to do it. Because I think they really value that community. And for our context, like we're a small church, so we are a family.
Yeah.
Like it's, you got 80 people and 30 kids. It's just like a big family reunion,
Yeah.
Which is a lot of fun. I mean, there's challenges in all different, sizes and growth and stuff, because obviously you want to keep growing as a church, and there's different challenges in every era. But I'm enjoying it. I like going to church, which I know some pastors could say they don't like going to church.
Yeah.
So, and I can also say, my best friends and my closest people are in the church. I got friends outside too.
Yeah.
But it gets me really excited. And then the future idea of like, if we want to see revival in our community, it works by being the family of God and inviting people into that family.
Yeah.
And as you said, we were talking about before, like someone gets baptized and then they walk away. And I think we can do that and be very individualistic. Like, here we are here, and here's the church family. We're all just like, here's our own plots kind of a deal. Here's our own plots of land. Like we're doing all this stuff instead of doing it together. And I think Americans in our culture, we don't like getting help from other people.
Yeah.
We don't like being vulnerable about our needs. We would rather just do it ourselves, like just work harder, make more money. So then I don't have to rely on anybody. I think that's like the American dream, is like you don't have to rely on anybody.
Yeah.
You just do it all yourself.
You're independent.
And I think in the church, it's like we should be able to rely on one another. That doesn't mean that we're irresponsible. I think some people take advantage of that.
Yeah.
But I think, we can rely on one another in the family of God. And again, sometimes it's like you're going through a tough season, someone else lifts you up, and then maybe in the future they're going through a tough season and you can lift them up. And
I think we've talked about Wendell Berry, I think, on the pod.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah. He's a believer. Talks a lot about like the agrarian society, which is very communal. Because your community has a blacksmith, and that blacksmith makes and repairs all of the plows and the pickaxes and the shovels and all that stuff. But he's not out there planting a farm, and harvesting crops. Like he's blacksmithing all the time. So he's getting, corn and vegetables and whatever from the rest of the community. And, someone over here grows corn and that person over there grows zucchini and this person grows tomatoes, and so there's like this communal aspect of like, hey, we all work together and we all depend on each other. And, we work because, and I feel like this is a thing that I think really gets lost in America too, but I think is really present in like an agrarian society, or I think in scripture, because they essentially were an agrarian society of like, I'm going to work really hard because the guy next to me needs me and my family needs me, but the guy next to me, the family next to me needs me, the blacksmith needs me, all these other people also need me. Whereas in America, like, you show up to work and you kind of slack. It's like, whatever. Like there's no like, you feel it. Some jobs are different. Like maybe if you're in law enforcement or you're
there's a communal aspect.
Yeah, or you work in an emergency department, or maybe you're a contractor or something. Maybe there's more of a sense of like, oh, I need to get this framing job done because the electrician comes tomorrow or the drywall guy comes, on Thursday or whatever. But yeah, I think it is so interesting that we, I think we've lost a lot of that like sense of just connectedness, and I think my buddy, again, I was talking with this morning, we were just talking about how God laid out society in scripture of like, hey, you should have sanctuary cities where like foreigners can come and they can live there and, like be supported. You're like, well, that's interesting. You don't hear about that a lot. I don't think they call them sanctuary cities, but essentially that, and just like, hey, for like loans and stuff, like it's not really interest, like if you see someone in need, like you give them a hand and like they pay it back. But then you have this year of Jubilee where like everything is forgiven, because there's also this sense of, I going back to the whole agrarian society thing, there's this sense in which, there's that line in, where is it? Where he owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Where is that?
I don't know.
Whatever. It's in there somewhere. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. This sense of like his storehouses are full. Like no one's going to count 1,000 hills. That's ridiculous. And but I think they understood that. When like you have a small flock of sheep or you have cattle, you're like, wow, he has 1,000 of this. Like that. It just like doesn't make sense. And so to think that way of like, no matter how much I have, God has more. I think there's so much more attached to that. Like if someone says like God has 1,000 bank accounts, you're just like, cool, that's great. So like kind of like Jeff Bezos,
Yeah.
But they had this sense of like, whatever I have, God has so much more, and I think they just related to that in a much different way than we do now. And so I think there's this like, yeah,
it's the whole thing. Like it's not our money, it's God's money, and we're just responsible for it.
Yeah.
And talking about like the whole communal aspect that you're talking about, it's fascinating. Like with the internet, as we've talked about before, the internet has made us more connected than ever before, but also much more disconnected than ever before. And I think what it's done is made our culture hyper transactional, where we are only in relationships for the transaction of the needs that we have.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you needed a plumber, you would look through the phone book, you'd call a plumber, or you'd know someone that knows a plumber. You'd call them, set up an appointment and stuff. And now it's the transaction. Like you can use a Google on your phone. You can go to their website. You can fill it out, and then somebody you don't know is just going to show up at your house, say, "Yeah, I'll do it," before even learning what their name is. And I feel like that's how, like, we even view relationships in general, and how people in the kind of consumeristic view of the church is very transactional. I'm going to give to this, and this is what I expect out of it. And if I don't get that, then I walk, and I'll go find something that fits that transaction. Where I give to that, not to show what I can give to this, or to be a part of this. I give to this to get what I want out of it. It's very transactional. And I think as a society, we have become much more like all relationships have become very transactional instead of more relational. Instead of seeing someone as a person, is more of like, what can I get out of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man. So what's the solution to that?
I think it's the whole idea of family, bro.
Yeah.
I think it's pushing against that. It's pushing back against the culture that's saying, let's be more transactional, and say, no, let's be more fruitful in our relationships. And I think part of that has to do with the depth. I think transactional relationships are very surfacey. You never talk about anything of importance. You never talk about what you're going through. There's never any kind of emotions in it. It's just kind of like, the whole thing of like, how you doing? I'm doing fine. Nice. And you just move on. I think that is a very transactional, like a lack of depth.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole, people have more connections than ever before, less depth. So it's like, oh, we know 10 people. We have 10 friends, we'd say friends. But of all those friends, how many do you actually have a quality relationship? And by quality, I mean depth. Like, do they truly know who you are? Or is it more of, do they know your projection of what you want people to see? And I think for many people, we are living in this kind of projection world where we don't feel like people see us for who we are. We feel like we've kind of put on this image of what we want people to perceive us as.
Yeah.
And that's not depth. That's, again, that's very transactional. Then in your mind, it becomes, this person only wants to hang out with me because I'm acting this way. And if I actually act as who I am and actually share my thoughts for what I believe, then it won't be the same. They won't like me. And oftentimes that's true. It's a lie we tell ourselves. But I think it's just a lack of depth. And so I think if we want to push back on the transactional relationship kind of mantra, it's really focusing on depth and honesty. And the challenge with that is there is a possibility of experiencing pain, but I also think that to form quality relationships, pain is inevitable because we're human. And so I think the pros outweigh the cons. It's either have no quality relationships with anyone or nobody knows who you are.
Yeah. Do you think we live in a society, though, that doesn't, we don't really value quality relationships?
100%. Yeah. I mean, think about this. You can get an AI girlfriend. That's wild.
I mean,
we haven't talked about AI this whole episode, but you can get an AI boyfriend for females, whatever it is. That's not quality. It's a facade. It's this is fulfilling the needs that I have. Again, transactional. I'm just going for it right now. But it's like it's all transactional. It's like, okay, this is what I need. I'm actually going to pay money to get an AI girlfriend chatbot to fulfill my emotional needs, where there's nothing you give to it. Literally, it's like you have a slave on, because they're not going to push back. They're not going to do it. Like, slave's probably a bad word. It's like a servant, I guess, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Where they're not. They're not a person.
It's not something that's
It's fake.
It's so weird. Ugh, man, I feel like I just keep getting myself into trouble in this episode. It's like there's no emotional investment in that, like it's a thing that's not emotionally invested in your well-being. I feel like when you're dating, that's like a big shift when you're dating of like, I'm interested in this person, but I'm not like, to some degree when you first start dating, like you're invested in someone, but initially you're just kind of like, oh, I'm interested in this person. Like they check some boxes that like allow that pushed me into like, hey, let's go to the next step with this, right?
Yeah.
But there's a shift in dating where you go from like, oh, I think you're cool and I'm invested in you, or you're like, I'm interested in you, to like, oh, I'm actually invested in you. Like I'm invested in your well-being. I'm invested in and there's a point before you're married where like you're invested in someone's future regardless. You're just like, I just care about you. Like I want you to succeed, and like, but you don't have that. And I feel like that's a huge component of a relationship is like, I don't know, call me old fashioned, but I think dating for the sake of dating is silly.
Sure.
Like I think you're wasting everyone's time.
I will say, as long as you have healthy boundaries, I think dating, the only good thing that could come out of dating for just like dating for fun is you learn a lot about yourself.
I mean, there is that.
I think that's the only positive.
I think,
which is a good thing.
Maybe I should preface this with like, I think if you're just dating for the sake of dating but you're like, oh, I don't want anything serious right now, and you're just kind of dating, I'm like, I think that's kind of silly.
Yeah, I don't really see the point.
But whatever. We don't talk about
that. That's another episode.
Well, I'll get in more trouble. But I think that's like a really important aspect of building a deep connection. And I think it's the same thing with friendships.
Yeah.
Like I have people where I'm like, oh, you're pretty cool. We should hang out. And then it turns to a point where like I really care about this person. Like you're a good friend of mine. Like I want to pray for you. I want to know what's going on in your life. And if you're doing something dumb that I think is going to impact your future, like I'm going to tell you about it because I'm invested in who you are. It doesn't impact me. Like if you're like, you know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to sell my cars and buy a motorcycle. I'm going to tell you, I think that's dumb because A, it's not safe. And B, how are you like, it's just like, hey, I really care about you. If you want to do that, that's fine. I'm here for you. But like, I just want to point out that maybe that's a silly idea. Just in case nobody else has pointed out to you that it's a silly idea. And maybe they're like, hey, I've thought about all those things and I'm going to go for it. Maybe they're like, wow, thanks for being a good friend. I haven't thought about all those things.
Yeah.
You know, and man, just to have like, to not have that is crazy.
I just want to say, can you imagine a not so distant future where, let's say, a teenager grows up and they're just like curious and they're like, oh, I'm just going to get an AI girlfriend. They're really easy. Like you pay a subscription fee, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the only, and they don't date. They have, you know, like that's where they get their emotional kind of transaction from. And then they're like, okay, I've done this AI girlfriend thing. Like, it only gets like, there's nothing physical about it. It's very, I don't know, probably surfacey type level. And then that's all that they know. And can you imagine their first relationship with an actual person? If that's all that they know,
Yeah.
that seems like a recipe for disaster.
Dude, but that's why like Gen Z is not dating. Here, I gotta look that up.
I mean, yeah, this is a whole nother episode.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
it's highly.
hang on. Teens are dating less. A survey. I mean, this is the survey. This is the Survey Center of American Life. Survey conducted found that only 56% of Gen Z adults and 54% of Gen Z men said that they were involved in romantic relationships at any point in their teenage years. I read a whole I read a whole thing on it about how like Gen Z is dating less. They're getting their driver's license at a much older age, or just not at all. They're like having like just like every like normal adult thing. Like Gen Z was like, and it wasn't just like subtle decrease. It was like plummeting off a cliff.
Yeah.
You know, and you're just like, whoa, like, so with dating, it's like, man, like how, like,
Millennials was the same thing though, because I remember when they said that about millennials.
Yeah.
Like, you don't move out of your house when you're 18. Like, what's your problem?
yeah,
And now it's like that's normal, and so it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you can live at home till you're 30.
yeah. And I mean, the dating thing is, I think is telling of just kind of the bigger picture of like, I feel like as a culture, we're less prone to getting close to people and being vulnerable and I think that's
100%.
like, we live in, my goodness, I just feel like when are we going to end this? I feel like I keep going down weird rabbit holes. I feel like we're in a very like affirming culture, you know, of like, that's a big thing right now of affirming everyone's gender or what everyone thinks about themselves. Whereas like I've had, you know, I've kind of like a different career path. Like I have my own business and like we started a nonprofit. And we do like kind of different from like the normal, like go to college, get a job type career path, which is, I think it's fairly normal now that people have some alternate career path, or it's becoming way more normal. But I mean, there's so many close friends that would ask me like, hey, like, what, like, not in like a condemning way or like a way to be like you're an idiot, but just like hey, like, what's your plan? Like, you sure you got this? Like, you know, just like checking in to make sure like, hey, like, you good? Like, you making right choices? Like, and so I just feel like we've lost that in culture. And I feel like now, you know, especially with a lot of the gender stuff, it's just like, we just affirm. And we don't like try and like scratch the surface of like, hey, what's really the root cause of this? Like, like, is there an issue with your family at home? Like, you know, like how can we like go upstream and hit the root of the issue? Because I feel like in a lot of these circumstances, like we're not the root of the issue. Like we don't want to touch the root of the issue. We just want to be like, oh, there's a problem. Like we're gonna just throw some plaster over that and sand it and paint it and call it good. You know?
So I think it's the whole idea we've talked about this multiple times on the pod, but it's the idea of we should be able to have relationships with people that see the world differently than us.
Yeah.
But being able to have those opinions and be okay that if they're different. And I think what we're talking about, like, and that's why I said like the AI girlfriend, you could pay for a subscription to get AI girlfriend, and they will never probably, I mean, I don't know how it is. Maybe I don't know how AI girlfriends work, but maybe, I'm assuming they're not going to push back at all. They're not going to be like, oh, it's just a smart idea.
No.
It's just constant, like, you're so great, everything is wonderful. And sometimes you do things that aren't so great.
Yeah.
And a real human, hopefully, would be like, hey, that doesn't seem like it's a smart idea.
Yeah.
And so it's just constant. There's no healthy pushback.
Yeah.
And so then again, as I talked about before, it becomes very transactional. And then when you enter into a relationship with a real human, your expectation is like, oh, they're never going to push back. And it's all, what can I get out of this, not what can I give to this.
Yeah.
And those two things, as someone who's been married for 12 years, almost next month, that's not what a healthy marriage is.
Yeah.
You should be able to have healthy dialogue and get healthy feedback, speak the truth in love.
Yeah.
As well as marriage is not about what you can get out of it. It's about what you can give to it.
Yeah.
And that is what kind of concerns me as a culture moving forward. And by culture, it's like, it's built by how men and women relate, how people relate to each other. And that's like the building blocks of culture, of building society. And so it's going to be highly fascinating to see how all of that plays out, which is concerning because it's like an experiment. Like, this has never happened before.
Yeah.
You've never been able, in human history, you have never been able to pay a subscription fee to have a relationship with a computer that is not a real person.
Yeah.
That will respond to you and all of your questions.
Like a real person.
Like a real person would, but it's not real. And so then it's the whole idea of now we have emotional ties and emotional bonds and brain wiring, again, to a computer that is not a person.
Yeah.
And so then it's even the idea that people are going to have to grieve and have potentially significant loss because
when the power goes out.
Seriously.
Yeah, dude.
When the power goes out, like, oh, like or like it was on that phone, and that's the relationship I had with that computer bot, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
But with the internet, it could last, who knows, the cloud and all that type of stuff. I'm not.
The
I'm
algorithm
not sure.
changed, and now she's not the same.
Yeah, and I mean, I was even listening to a podcast. I think it was Preston Sprinkle. We can wind this thing down, but he was saying like, oh, even in the future, if there's a way you can download your personality, basically your brain, onto a computer, it's like, oh, you live forever. That's just untrue.
It is.
One EMP, which is electromagnetic pulse, destroys all electronics. Boom, gone,
done for.
So there's no way you can live forever. There's always going to be that.
Well, it's great. Like, we already know, like, science has already proven that this is a problem with, like, I think we talked about this last week, of the detrimental effects of pornography on the brain.
Yeah. Of
just like how you're not attached to a human. You're not attached to like a physical person that you can see and like is in your presence. You're attached to like a 2D image on a screen. That's what your brain is drawing connection and pleasure with, not a person. And so we've seen like how that has had such a negative effect on relationships in real life. And so it just seems like now you add AI to that. And the crazy thing, and this is true with pornography and Facebook and any social media, whatever, is that, with like an AI girlfriend that's subscription based, like there's monetary gain there. Like, the goal isn't to make you happy. The goal is to keep you opening that app and keep you invested in this girlfriend. And like, what's the last thing that people want in a partner is someone who's like, hey, I think that's a silly thing you're doing. Maybe you should stop that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny.
I predict, here's this terrible Steven Anderson prediction.
Okay.
It's going to be the same model as like a Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you start out like, 99 cents a month. And then it's like, oh, if you want to keep this up, $5 a month. Oh, if you don't pay $10 a month, then your access to this.
Like, it will only talk to you for an hour a day.
Unless you pay more money. Dude. Honestly, concerning is like, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah.
That's just the reality.
Yeah.
And when we haven't even talked about robotics and where that's coming.
Yeah.
And how they already have sex robot brothels in other countries.
I thought you were going to bring that up about 5 minutes ago. And I was like, man, he's going there.
Next time.
Okay.
Next time. But that, dude, it's going to be the Wild West.
Dude, it already is the Wild West, man. And I think
great hope for the church.
I think there is great hope for the church. And we see a massive revival in the church. And I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing, I think, unfortunately, like it is in scripture of people not paying attention to sound doctrine and the love of many growing cold. We know that is a reality of scripture moving forward. And that's that's the design of things. But I think, like the hope of Jesus is just as important today as it was yesterday, as it will be tomorrow.
Amen.
And his mercies are new each morning.
Amen.
Praise
what a
God.
great place to end.
Yeah, I feel like it was a good one.
We went a lot of directions there.
That was bumpy for a while. like all of it was bumpy.
We started with property ownership and the economy, and ended with sex robot brothels.
Yeah. Till next time.
That's why you listen to the Spiritual Gap. All of your needs.
Oh boy. Well,
relevant stuff though. I mean, it's just the reality.
it is.
This is
the reality.
That's real life, and that's sadly that's just the reality we live in. So
Yeah, but I mean, go out there and bring the kingdom to earth.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
All right. See you next week.